What if I told you that the world has already entered an invisible countdown, and that it all started with a single sentence spoken by Trump in 2017? It sounds like, but it is not. The recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital was not only political, it was the exact fulfillment of what was already written thousands of years ago in the King James Bible. Zechariah 12 warns, Jerusalem would be a heavy stone capable of shaking all nations. And do you already notice how this weight is falling on the planet? Wars, financial crises, social divisions, the feeling that everything is about to explode. Doesn't it seem that we are seeing the end times before our eyes? It's scary, I know. But at the same time, there is relief. The same King James Bible that announces judgment also reveals the promise of protection for those who trust in God. It's like going through a storm, knowing that there is a safe haven prepared for you. Now, I need your help. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This is not just a symbolic gesture. It is the fuel that allows me to continue to bring deep analyses, always grounded in the Word, and show how current events are aligned with the apocalypse. Together, we will unravel the signs that many ignore. Because, believe me, ignoring these signs is like turning off the fire alarm and going back to sleep. But those who decide to open their eyes find not only fear, but hope. The Bible does not make mistakes, and every detail we see today was already foreseen. The question is, will you choose to watch passively or prepare for what's coming? On December 6, 2017, Donald Trump took the podium of the White House and said something that echoed around the world. Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. A short sentence, but loaded with centuries of tension, faith, and expectation. It was as if a prophecy kept silent had found its voice in that moment. Many didn't realize it right away, but the story had just changed course. What seemed only political, in fact, stirred the heart of the apocalypse. For 70 years, American presidents have avoided this step. Democrats, Republicans, all preferred the comfort zone, that don't mess with it, that causes problems. But Trump, with his bold and unpredictable style, decided to break protocol. It's like that neighbor who, instead of tiptoeing around a sleeping house, turns on all the lights and claps his hands. Of course, this aroused not only the residents, but also the attention of the whole world. The impact was immediate. Religious leaders in Israel saw this gesture as more than political. They saw in it the hand of God moving ancient pieces on the board. For them, it was as if the prophetic clock had jumped. Imagine someone who waits years for the announcement of a concert and suddenly the ticket starts to be sold. That was the feeling. The recognition of Jerusalem was the start of a sequence that was already written in Zechariah 12. To those who observe from the outside, it may seem like just another government decision. But the wise understand that there are invisible layers. When Trump spoke about Jerusalem, he didn't just state a position. He touched a bare thread of history that connects Israel to the end times. It is as if he has put his hands on the spiritual engine that drives the prophecies. Those who noticed felt the shiver. This was not just geopolitics, it was a living apocalypse. And, of course, this gesture did not stop there. Trump's speech was the trigger that opened the door to even deeper events, global reactions. Biblical comparisons with Cyrus, debates about the temple, and even peace treaties that echo the so-called peace and security. The 2017 speech was only the initial spark, but the prophetic fire was yet to come. Until 2017, no US president had dared to stir this hornet's nest called Jerusalem. There were 11 presidents from different parties, all saying the same: one day we will recognize Jerusalem as the capital, but never complying. It was like that diet promise that everyone talks about on New Year's Eve but always puts off. But Trump, in his characteristic style, decided to break the taboo. He did what no one wanted to risk. This decision sounded like a diplomatic bombshell. It wasn't just a matter of moving an embassy. It was to reconfigure decades of agreements, alliances, and tensions. Imagine someone pulling the handbrake on a busy highway. That's exactly what Trump did. In recognizing Jerusalem, he ignored the fear of the global crisis and chose the path of courage. For many, foolishness. For others, the fulfillment of prophecy. This breakdown of consensus put Trump on a unique level. While previous leaders preferred to avoid headaches, he took on the burden that had been delayed for decades. Interestingly, this reminds us of passages like Zechariah 12, which already spoke of the weight that Jerusalem would have for the nations. And suddenly, this weight fell on the lap of the international community, as if the Bible had gone from the pages to the headlines. Of course, the question that many asked was, why now? Why Trump? And this is where the prophetic vision gains strength. Because if history is a stage, this decision seemed more like an act rehearsed a long time ago. Trump, without realizing it or not, was staging something that was already in the script of the end times. Anyone who reads the signs understands that certain choices are not just political, they are spiritual milestones. And this milestone opened the door to something even more astonishing: the immediate reaction of the world, the resistance of the nations, and the prophetic echoes that followed. The taboo was broken, and the consequence would be to see how the world would respond to this new reality in Jerusalem. As soon as Trump recognized Jerusalem as Israel's capital, the reaction was like a tidal wave that no one could contain. The UN met in a hurry. World leaders made inflammatory statements, and protests erupted in several cities. It was as if a button had been pressed and all the alarms went off at the same time. The decision was not restricted to the headlines. It touched deep nerves in politics and spirituality. Countries allied with the US, which were usually supportive of everything, this time turned against Trump. Nations in Europe, the Middle East, and even strategic partners harshly criticized the change. It was the famous all against one, and, curiously, this reflected what was already written in Zechariah 12. Jerusalem would become a heavy stone for all nations. What seemed like just diplomacy became the stage for real-time prophecy. Interestingly, many political leaders saw Jerusalem as an insoluble problem, a knot that no one wanted to undo. But when Trump made the decision, that knot was pulled hard, and the whole world reacted. Imagine a rope stretched to the maximum. When pulled, it impacts on all sides. This is what Jerusalem was like in 2017, stretching global tensions to the highest point. For those who see beyond the surface, this immediate reaction is a clear sign that history is moving towards something bigger. It wasn't just about an embassy or political speeches. It was about aligning events with revelation. The world's own resistance showed that there is a spiritual battle going on, and Jerusalem is the center of this battlefield. And this international resistance was just the beginning. Before long, the nations would meet in a vote at the UN. And what happened there would be seen by many as the literal fulfillment of an ancient prophecy. The storm was just beginning, and the sky was darkening over Jerusalem. A few days after Trump's speech, the UN organized a historic vote. The result was resounding: 128 countries against the recognition of Jerusalem as Israel's capital. This was not just a political decision, it was almost a prophetic theater being staged before everyone's eyes. The scene resembled a direct echo of Zechariah 12, all the nations gathered against Jerusalem. It wasn't a metaphor, it was a headline. Those who observed with spiritual eyes had no doubt the prophecy was happening in real time. Imagine someone reading the Bible in the morning and seeing the same text in the news in the afternoon. It was just like that. People in Israel commented in the squares, rabbis argued in synagogues, and Christians around the world shared verses. It was as if the invisible had crossed the visible without asking permission. This episode showed how much the world still revolves around Jerusalem. Even countries with no direct connection to Israel wanted to vote, give their opinion, and take a stand. It's curious, isn't it? Small territories, bigger crises happening, but all focused on a single city. This reveals that Jerusalem is not just a piece of land. It is the prophetic clock that marks the steps of the end times. For those seeking understanding, this moment was like a practical lesson. It was the opportunity to see how politics and spirituality intertwine. Just like someone who studies theory and suddenly applies it to a real experiment, the students of prophecy could see that it was not speculation, but fulfillment. It was a clear invitation to wake up, open my eyes and see the signs. And this awakening did not stop there. After this vote, other comparisons began to emerge, bringing even more strength to the prophetic symbolism. Trump has come to be seen by many as a figure comparable to Cyrus, that king who changed Israel's history and paved the way for the temple. And this connection ignited even deeper debates. After the UN vote, an unexpected comparison gained traction in Israel. Trump was placed side by side with Cyrus, the Persian king mentioned in Isaiah 45. Cyrus was the ruler who, even though he was not Jewish, freed the people from captivity and allowed the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. For many Jewish leaders, Trump's gesture reminded them of just that. It was prophetic. Israel's Sanhedrin even issued official statements calling Trump a kind of modern-day Cyrus. They saw in the American president not only a bold politician, but an instrument of God used to fulfill important parts of prophecy. This analogy was not restricted to the religious field, but also echoed in the newspapers, bringing to light intense debates about Revelation, Israel, and the end times. It's curious how history repeats itself, isn't it? A foreign leader, unlikely in the eyes of the world, suddenly becomes a key player in the fate of Jerusalem. Many Christians recalled that, just as Cyrus did not fully know the God of Israel, Trump was also not seen as a saint. Still, his decisions were in line with the prophetic plan. This shows that when it comes to fulfilling prophecies, God uses even those whom no one expects. To the attentive viewer, this parallel is a reminder that every political move can carry a spiritual weight. It's like looking at a chessboard. While ordinary players see only pieces, the DM already sees the entire game. In Trump's case, the pieces were being moved toward something bigger, setting the stage for events linked to the temple and the fulfillment of Zechariah 12. And this theme of the temple began to come up more and more in conversations. Jewish leaders saw in Trump's gesture not only a political victory, but a step that brought Israel closer to the reconstruction of the temple, the central point of so many prophecies. Cyrus' speech in the past connected to the present, and the prophetic flame was still burning. After Trump was compared to Cyrus, something began to gain traction in Israel: talk of rebuilding the temple. For Jews, this is one of the greatest symbols of identity and faith, and for those who look through the lens of prophecy, it is also the central stage of end-time events. The gesture of recognizing Jerusalem rekindled this ancient dream, like embers that burn again after a long time extinguished. Religious leaders began to speak openly that Trump's decision paved the way for the temple to be rebuilt in the future. It is not just about politics, but about spirituality. Imagine someone preparing the foundations of a house that will be built. Many years later, the first brick was already being laid. That brick, in this case, was the official recognition of Jerusalem. For Christians studying eschatology, this theme is chilling. After all, the temple is not just a building. It is the point where prophecies linked to the apocalypse intertwine. Many saw this as a direct connection to the clock of God, which moves towards Zechariah 12 and other passages. When Israel speaks of the temple, the whole world should stop to listen, because there is the center of the prophetic narrative. And the most impressive thing is that, little by little, even practical movements began to emerge. Jewish institutions were already preparing utensils, priests were training rituals, and even priestly garments were made. It's as if everything is being rehearsed for the big day. To those who observe from the outside, it may seem like just tradition. But for those who understand the prophecy, it's a trailer for what's to come. And of course, this preparation does not happen in isolation. The temple, in addition to being a hope for Israel, also generates global tension, as it is linked to territorial and spiritual disputes. Every step in this direction provokes a reaction, and this reaction shapes the scenario that we will see in the next prophetic chapters: agreements, alliances, and even the promise of peace and security. 3 years after Trump's speech, another historic move shook the Middle East scene: the Abraham Accords. Israel, which for decades had been in conflict with its neighbors, suddenly signed peace treaties with the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and Morocco. It was like seeing old enemies shaking hands, something unthinkable for previous generations. The feeling was that a new era was dawning in Jerusalem. These agreements were seen as a political victory, but for those who see the prophecies, the meaning was even greater. He directly recalled the text of 1 Thessalonians 5:3, when they say peace and security. Sudden destruction will come. This expression, so repeated in biblical debates, took shape before the eyes of the world. What seemed like peace actually carried in the background preparation for times of great tribulation. It is curious how politics creates a sense of stability. Leaders and economists spoke of prosperity, tourism and trade, as if Israel had found a key to living in security. But, just like someone who builds a glass house, the fragility is always greater than it seems. This apparent peace revealed another step within the apocalypse, bringing closer the scenarios described in Ezekiel and Zechariah 12. For the people, there was a mixture of hope and caution. Many celebrated, others were suspicious. And here's an object lesson: not all peace is true. How many times in our personal lives do we accept situations that seem to bring relief, but deep down hide greater risks? So it was with the Abraham Accords. The world applauded, but the spiritual eyes knew that something deeper was happening. And this something pointed to an even more specific detail. Israel was beginning to live in a sense of security, just as Ezekiel 38 describes. This condition prepared the ground for the coming chapters, when nations would rise in coalition against Jerusalem. The stage was set, and the curtains were beginning to open. After the Abraham Accords, Israel entered a phase that seemed unprecedented in its modern history, a sense of peace and security. Streets that were once remembered for conflicts began to receive tourists, investments, and international trade. It was as if the city of Jerusalem, so often marked by wars, breathed a different air. But for those who know Ezekiel 38-11, this calm is not the end, but a prelude. The biblical text speaks exactly of this: Israel living without walls, gates or bars, enjoying prosperity and confidence. This image fit like a puzzle piece in the post-agreement scenario. Imagine a house with the windows open in a dangerous neighborhood. From the outside, it looks like tranquility. Inside, it's a latent risk. Thus was Israel living what many called an illusory peace. It is fascinating to observe how this feeling of security has brought concrete advances. Startups flourished, the real estate sector exploded, and countries that were once enemies began to trade freely with Israel. For the world, it was progress. For those who read the prophecies, it was the perfect alignment for the next move on the spiritual board. What seemed like a blessing was actually setting the stage for the shock. And here's an object lesson: too often in life we seek peace at any cost, without realizing whether that peace is solid or just an appearance. How many people turn a blind eye to warning signs just to experience a sense of security? Israel was experiencing something similar: outwardly prosperity, inwardly vulnerability. The prophecy already made it clear that this lull would be temporary. And it is precisely in this apparent calm that the opportunity arises for an enemy coalition to rise. Just as a thief waits for the moment when the house is most relaxed, so the surrounding nations awaited the time to act. The stage was set for the formation of the prophetic coalition that Ezekiel had described centuries ago. While Israel enjoyed a sense of peace and security, another movement loomed behind the scenes, unlikely alliances between nations that had previously barely tolerated each other. Russia, Iran, Turkey, Libya and Sudan began to move closer together, forming strategic and military blocs. For the newspapers, this was pure geopolitics. But for those who understand prophecy, it was the exact Photon and 39, the plot seemed in. These alliances are intriguing because they unite countries that, in many ways, do not share such deep cultures or interests. What unites them is a common factor: opposition to Israel. It is like a group of school rivals who, despite their differences, come together to face the same opponent. The detail is that this union was already foreseen more than 2,600 years ago, and now it became news. For the attentive observer, there is no way to ignore the parallel. When Ezekiel described Gog and Magog, he spoke of a coalition that would come against Israel in the end times. Today, we see modern armies, military treaties, and energy partnerships that strengthen exactly these nations. It's like watching a movie where the script has already been read, but we are still surprised by each scene. And this training doesn't just happen at the military level. There is a war of narratives, with leaders speaking out against Jerusalem in international forums, reinforcing the idea that Israel is the world's central problem. This rhetoric inflames crowds and creates an environment of increasing hostility. Anyone who knows Zechariah 12 knows Jerusalem would be a heavy stone, and today we see in practice this weight bothering the whole world. The curious thing is that, while this coalition is strengthened, many still believe that everything is just politics. But anyone who reads the signs knows that every treaty, every covenant, and every speech is pushing history toward a prophetic climax. And that climax would not be the end itself, but the opening to the most intense sequence of events, the trigger that started it all. Trump's recognition of Jerusalem was not a full stop, but rather that opened a new sentence in history. It was the trigger that set in motion a prophetic gear that can no longer be stopped. First, the breaking of the diplomatic taboo. Then, the world reaction. Then, the comparison with Cyrus, the temple, the peace agreements, and the sense of security in Israel. Each piece fit together like a domino, falling one after the other. It is fascinating to note how a simple speech could accelerate centuries of expectation. Just as a stone thrown into the lake generates waves that reach distant shores, the 2017 decision still echoes in our days. The headlines, the debates at the UN, the Abraham Accords, all of this was born out of that gesture. The world may interpret it as politics, but those who know the prophecy understand the clock of the apocalypse has accelerated. This prophetic trigger also teaches us something practical. Often, small gestures that seem irrelevant have impacts that multiply. It's like deciding to read a chapter of the Bible a day. It seems little, but years later, this discipline shapes an entire life. Similarly, Trump's decision seemed administrative, but it turned out to be spiritual. The secret lies in perceiving the invisible behind the visible. And, like any trigger, the effect does not happen all at once. It opens doors to future chapters, and those chapters were already written in Scripture. Jerusalem being the center of attention, Israel living peace and security, the enemy coalition forming. All these are pieces that push us towards what is yet to come. Anyone to add 38. And the book of Revelation notices the clear line that connects all the dots. This beginning of the prophetic sequence is like the opening of an epic book. The introduction already hooks us. But we know that the story will still intensify. Every move in Jerusalem points to something greater, and what seemed unlikely yesterday is now before our eyes. The spark has been lit, and the whole world is walking to see the full fire of prophecy. Given all this, there is a hammering question. Are you just watching the signs of the end times as if it were a movie, or are you really preparing for what lies ahead? Because if Jerusalem is at the center of prophecy, you are also part of that story. What will define your future is not politics nor the UN, but the spiritual choices you make today. You may think, but what can I do in the face of something so big? The answer is simple and practical. Align your life with the Word, strengthen your faith, and keep your eyes on Israel and Jerusalem. Just as Trump was an unlikely instrument, you can be used by God in the most unexpected places. The question is, are you willing? Now I provoke you. If tomorrow it were announced that the temple would be rebuilt, would you see only a news report, or would you recognize the fulfillment of the prophecy? This difference in perception can change everything. It's like having your eyes open while others walk in the dark. It's not time to live on automatic. It's time to wake up. And before you leave, I want to invite you to join this journey with me. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep following each new content. Here, we will together connect current events with ancient prophecies, and you won't want to miss any details. After all, understanding the signs can be the key to transforming not only the future of the world, but your own destiny.